So, hey everybody, good evening, good, really, really early morning if you're Prometheus God. Hey Ravens Path, how's it going? I see everybody on, and I'm happy to be doing a live tonight. It's actually a good topic, and Ravens Path actually brought this one up during the last live. And, I have my own personal stories about it. Everybody has their own personal stories on it. GM burnout is one thing, burnout is another thing, but they're related. And a lot of the same things that we're going to discuss kind of go both ways. They do a little bit of overlap into how you might deal with it. And very specifically for this topic, which is GM burnout, you might actually not be thinking that. Actually, let me rephrase that. So, with GM burnout, it actually might not be the GM part of it that's burning you out. It could be things outside of the game that are forcing you to burn out in general. So these tips are going to kind of go over in this particular live stream is something that we're going to go ahead and talk about, and then you can apply them how you want to. And I've been trying to do that myself a bit lately, only because of the new year, that kind of stuff. But there are a few things that I did want to talk about coming up in the news, and one of the big things that's coming out is Monster Core is going to be coming out. I'm looking up here on the screen. March 27th is when Monster Core is going to be coming out, and I'm really looking forward to that. I saw two news items on the Paizo community blog. Once again, don't sleep on the community blog. Very specifically talking about Monster Core and its release. We got some dragons, we got some undead that we've been able to see, and I'll kind of show you where those are, and I'll put a link to those in the description of this particular live after we're done doing that. And then we'll go ahead and just kind of get into it a little bit. So first thing I want to do is I just want to show there are two little Paizo community blog entries that are very specifically dealing with Monster Core. First one, well, we'll do the one that's on the screen right now. Actually, we have Monsters Resurrected. This is the latest one. This is from January 24th. And we have Logan Bonner, and he's talking about it is so bean counter. It's a little bit of both, I think. They're basically re-skinning a bunch of old monsters and bringing them up to remaster. I don't want to say standards, but remaster accountables with bean counter in your name. But what they are doing is basically going to be re-releasing them to make them fit with sanctified and holy and unholy and spirit damage and some of the new damage types and some of the new rules. And I think it'll probably be a lot easier to play the game with the remaster rules and GM core, simply because a lot of the nomenclature will be very similar. I know very specifically in some of the games that I've been playing, especially when you're dealing with the big one I can think of is Infernals or Fiends. How do those actually fit into the sanctified, holy, unholy spirit damage side of it? And I actually had a video about like 2 videos ago or something like that. I actually gave the example of this. In my head, I kind of know how it works, but when I'm sitting there at a table playing live, it's a little bit different. So this is a little bit more than a reskin, but a lot of it, they want to get away from SRD naming of some monsters and that kind of stuff from D&D OGL. So all this was planned way back when all that stuff happened. And that is one news item I'm not going to talk about is the D&D Hasbro thingy. I have no idea what's going on with that. And I'm not in a good position to talk about it personally, actually. So some of the design goals, and actually they actually have part of this in the blog post itself. So they want to match the remaster rules. So they actually have good examples here. For instance, changing negative healing to void healing, using a reactive strike as opposed to attack of opportunity, basically changing the naming of the rules so everything matches up a lot better. Collecting the greatest hits. Now there's a bestiary 1 through 3, and this is Monster Core. So to my knowledge, and from what I have read, heard, and stuff like that, the lives, is there's not going to be Monster Core 2, 3. They're pretty much taking, like they were saying, the best of monsters from the bestiaries and putting them in Monster Core. So I'm super happy to see that. Replace some OGL monsters. This is the OGL system reference document, SRD thing they were talking about, where they're cutting some creatures out simply because they don't want to run into any issues in the future with naming or IP from other people. Match the mythology. One of the things they have been talking about in the lives is they want to theme the monsters if they have to go away from the SRD and the old things. Because once again, Pathfinder came from 3.5, D&D 3.5. So there was obviously some overlap there. So one of the directions they want to go to are actual creatures in our mythology. So they want to start theming it that way. And then they want to include as many monsters as they could reasonably fit. I'm really interested to see what the page count this is going to be. But they supposedly have a whole bunch of variety. It's longer than the first bestiary, but beyond that, they have more stat blocks. And there are changes to stat, just like there's changes to stat blocks in the remaster from Player Core, from the Player Core Handbook. Pre-remaster, there are some stat changes. Some of the monsters, and you can actually see one in this blog post. But one of the ones that they highlighted, and this, like I said, this was the latest one, was the Mummy Guardian, and it's a 6th level creature. I'm not necessarily going to read everything, but some things I did want to point out is, once again, they brought in the Unholy trait, which is helpful if you're dealing with the Sanctified, Holy, Unholy spirit damage side of it. I do too. NPC Gallery, that was one of my big hits when I saw basically the new things that were coming out in Player Core and GM Cores. There was no NPC Gallery. The NPC Gallery is gone, and that is unfortunate. It's one of my favorite things. You can still use the old one. It's still on Archives of Nethys. So I think it's on Archives of Nethys. Archives of Nethys doesn't have 100% of Paizo published things, but I believe the NPC Gallery is on Archives of Nethys. However, you can still use the old one, but it is unfortunate that the new books don't have it, because if you're physically carrying books around, you're going to have to take that third book with you in order to kind of have it. Languages, once again, they changed languages, plus with any one language they knew while they were alive. So I guess that would be for the regional or theming of your particular adventure. They do have void healing. It depends. So I have done 2 basic forms of GMing. GMing is really relatively new to me within the past year or so. Is if I'm doing Pathfinder Society, I've done that in person. If I'm doing, but most of the adventures I do are virtual tabletop. If I'm doing virtual tabletop, I like the PDFs and Archives of Nethys because it's quicker. But I don't like that if I'm actually playing at a table. So, but I do get exactly what you're saying. Let's see, void healing. Once again, they changed the name of it. Weaknesses, alchemical weaknesses, blighted consumption, curse, divine, poison. I'm trying to see if there's any other naming things that I had missed. I didn't see any before. We do have, as opposed to negative, we have void for choking pain. So basically, you kind of get a look at a mummy guardian in this particular case. And you can see that they have changed the naming so it matches the remastered rules. So if you're like me and you like to play clerics or champions or things that do spirit damage and you're worried about being sanctified, this is definitely going to help you out in that particular case. So the other one I wanted to bring up, and this is the older one, this is from January 19th. This is the Adamantine Dragon. There is not a stat block on this, but the Adamantine Dragon is the one that is on the cover of the book. And there's not a lot for me to talk about, although once again, the concept art is fantastic. I have this kind of open up in another window here, but Kent Hamilton did the drawing for this as well, just like we saw in the previews of Player Core and GM Core. So super happy to see that. It looks awesome. These are a little bit hard to read. You could possibly read it, everything that's on the drawing, but once again, I'm going to put both of these blog posts in the description of this so you can get to it. But if you actually, so for the Adamantine Dragon, I'm going to put it in the chat just in case anybody wants to take a look at it, especially this one. But this is the dragon one that's in the chat. And then for this one here, The second one is going to be for, you can see a stat block and see how it is going to be different from what it was pre-remaster. So kind of that being said, I kind of want to go into the, I guess, the main topic of this particular live stream. Once again, I do want to thank Raven's Path for actually bringing this one up. It's a great topic, and it really is something that creeps up on you, and you have to pay attention to it because you won't actually notice it right away. Burnout is a real thing, and it can be very frustrating. It can really hamper your game. It can hamper your performance. It can hamper, especially when you're a game master, it can hamper the entertainment of everybody at the table. And I do have a couple notes here, not too many though. Most of this is just going to be mainly from my experience. But burnout is just one of those things that can be caused by a bunch of different things. If you are, I have a YouTube channel, so you would think this wouldn't necessarily be true. But in truth, I'm more of an introvert than an extrovert. And what I mean by that, everybody has their own definition, but this is what I mean of that, is that I have a very specific social battery. And extroverts can charge their battery with interactions. Introverts wears them down. So if I have a whole bunch of things going on at once, a whole bunch of personal interactions that have to go on all at once, my social battery wears down. And you don't notice when it happens. And it bleeds into other things. In truth, like end of last year, last quarter, or actually almost the whole year last year, from March till December, from when the channel started till December, is I was doing 5 to 7 videos a week, plus the lives, plus this, since January, and it's simply because of things not related to the channel, work, family stuff, whatever. I've had less time to actually go ahead and record stuff. This is only my second live stream of the year, and I want to do these every Thursday, but I've had to do it every 2 weeks, simply because you just don't have the time. And then when you do have the time, you might sit on the couch and watch old episodes of something you like forever. And that burnout can really wear you down. And unless you do something to actively stop it, it's just going to keep going with you. So here are some of the things that I think of when I'm GMing and I start noticing burnout. And that would be, the first one is, if you are having, the first time I ever noticed it actually is I was running a session with some of my particular friends. Introverts Unite. Yeah, exactly. I just saw that. Raven's Path is one of the first things that I noticed is, so I was running, geez, I can't think of it now. I was running one of the third-party independent creator Orc Stand Together campaign. That's what it was. Orc Stand Together campaign. And I'm playing in 2 and I was GMing that one. Now I'm playing in 3. I started another one just this week. But, and anytime someone came up with, oh, I'm going to be half an hour late because after I have homework. Oh, well, we could cancel if you want to. You come up with reasons to cancel. You come up with a reason to not do it. If there's any type of minor thing that might hamper it, if you don't propose it, you're thinking of, well, could I just cancel this session? Maybe I could just sit at home and do nothing. That's a big telltale sign for me, is I start looking for an out as to why I could somehow prevent someone from not coming into my social interaction and making my battery go smaller. The other one that I can think of is you start running out of ideas. And this might be something that you can use with your players and have your players let you know. If you normally like to mix things up, if you like to match the creatures to the terrain, not even so much you're in a desert, so you run desert creatures. But if you're in near mine shafts and near mountains, then you'd run different creatures than you would if you were just in the vast expanse of a faceless desert. So maybe if your encounters are always the same, maybe if you are doing a random encounter rule, some type of exploration or something like that, and everything starts seeming the same, every combat starts seeming the same, check in with your players and see if they are having fun. And if you're having a hard time coming up with creative uses of creatures or creative encounters, that could definitely be something. Another big one is, and this is one I haven't run into it truthfully in tabletop role-playing games. How often do I? So the Orc Strong Together campaign ended 2 weeks ago. So I was running basically 2-to-1. So I was doing I was being a player 2 times a week and GMing once a week. At the moment, I am not GMing anything, and I'm player in all 3 campaigns that I'm running. Putting off prep. That's actually that's exactly what I'm getting to right now. Now I have Raven's Path. That's a very good point. You're psychic. So this hasn't happened to me in tabletop role-playing games yet. It happens to me at work. Truthfully, that's where it happens to me. And when I start noticing it is even the good stuff or the stuff that you normally like, the parts of your day you normally like. And for tabletop role-playing games, if you like the preparation, if you like creating the encounters, if you like creating maps, I love creating maps. I love creating characters. I love creating NPCs. But if it starts to feel like work, if you sit there and you get done with your 9-to-5 job or whatever you're doing, and you sit down and you be like, oh, I got 3 more hours of this. When it stops being fun, super, super red flag for being GM burnout, for having that come up to you. And the other thing I can think of, this has actually happened to me now that I think about it, is it happened to me on, I'm not going to say the night because I don't know if anybody, I generally don't tell the people I'm playing with, especially if it's virtual, like I'm playing on Foundry or something like that. I don't tell them, I'm a small channel. Don't think that don't know that. However, I don't tell people that I have a YouTube channel because why would I want to do that? I don't, I don't want, and I also don't want someone coming to me, Don, what's the rule for? I don't want that to happen. So I was in one of my sessions and that one was getting kind of draggy. And then someone was talking about, oh yeah, we just had this session and they were playing Fist of the Ruby Phoenix was the campaign they were doing. That was not the one I was doing. Doesn't particularly matter to the campaign. It's the fact that they were talking about their campaign. I was like, oh, that sounds like so much more fun than this one is. If that thought crosses your mind, if what you're actually doing at that moment in time isn't fun and you're longing to hear what they're doing, that could be a really good sign for burnout. And then another case that you can view, once again, this is a reaction from your players, not something you necessarily act on or ask about. However, if seems like your players are starting to ignore you, and by that, I mean, you could be reading the text of an encounter, and I'm trying to come up with one that isn't going to be a spoiler, but let's say that you are in some type of cave exploration thing, and you're sitting there describing it and you're having, you walk into a shadowy room and you can see there's a hallway to the east with a green glow coming. And then there is an alcove off to the west. That's all you say. And everybody's talking about, well, I need to do this. Can I go ahead and do a little bit of crafting here in order to try to get my such and such? If it seems like no matter what you do, you can't find a prompt to have your players go forward, if they seem to be asking the questions that you think they should be asking you amongst themselves, it could be because they feel that you're being disengaged. So if you feel your players are starting to ignore you, it might be a moment to kind of step back and say, oh, well, maybe I'm not being as expressive as I normally am, or maybe I'm not. And not every GM has to be expressive. I love to role play. I'm horrible at it, but I love doing silly voices and stuff like that. But if that's not your style, totally cool. But your table knows that, and your table can still tell when you're being disengaged. And then the other one that is another symptom of this is all campaigns that I run in, if I'm a GM, I take notes. I take really good notes. If I'm a player, I take the notes for the table. And I guess it's related to work type stuff, but I'm pretty weird about it. Not weird, that makes me sound bad. I'm very prepared. Usually if I have a 3-hour session, I'm going to have 5 pages of notes. That's just the truth. And I'll post them and everybody can read them. As a GM, it's the same way. I generally tend to take big notes. And if I put them up there and no one views them, no one cares to view them, it's because the players aren't having fun at that point, because you are just not engaging with the table very well. And all this ties into one big thing, and I actually have it in probably triple the font size on my notes over here, is the big red flag is the game just isn't fun anymore. If it feels like a job and you're not getting paid for it, which most GMs aren't getting paid for it, it is something that you really need to consider what to do. Now, all I can think of for solutions, and these are the same solutions that pretty much most people say, not even for tabletop role-playing games. Well, actually, I do have some very specific tabletop role-playing games. Solutions or ideas, things that I have done in the past. But the first thing I can think about, and the first thing that I try to do when I recognize in myself that I am getting burnout, is to talk about it. Get a new group. That is true. Or get a new group where you're not the GM. Take a break from GMing. But that's second point, third point, somewhere along those lines. First thing, talk about it. Just talk about it at the table. Talk about it with your players. Tell your players that, hey, I know it seems like I've been a little bit off my game. There's just a lot of stuff going on, and I might need to take a break, or start proposing other ideas. There's things like, I was wondering if we could possibly take next week off, maybe run twice a month. GMs can actually play, and I have a fantastic one here that I like. This is what I have done, not as a burnout tactic, but because when we were doing Orc Strong together, we had people who couldn't play. We had a 4-person party, 2 of them couldn't play. So what we did is, rather than cancel and rather than try and have a GM PC, me play their characters or somebody else play their characters, what we did is switch roles. Have the players run a session. Let's say you have, the first time you have your fighter, and your fighter is not going to be involved in the session that week. But what they are going to do is they're going to take the setting that they're in, maybe the city, the base city, maybe if you're doing a exploration, maybe that particular part of the adventure, and let them lead the party. And you, as a game master, make a GM PC who is maybe a future NPC, and have you play with the party while someone else GMs. And that way you're still in the setting, you still have the theming, you still have an idea of what you're doing. You're not just doing a one-off, and one-offs are totally fine. Don't get me wrong, one-offs can be fun, but one-offs to me, a lot of times, feel a little bit Monster of the Week-ish to me, and there's nothing wrong with Monster of the Week if that's what you want to play. But that isn't what everybody wants to play. And in truth, Monster of the Week, if I did a weekly Monster of the Week type session, I'd get bored of it, I would think, because then it's just combat, and I enjoy the role-playing side of it. But let you be a player for that week, and then the next week, have somebody else GM, have the fighter who was GMing, and the rogue is now GMing, and so they're not part of the party, but you're still the GM PC, and you can go ahead and have that mini adventure where you're not the GM for a brief period of time. The other things to do that I can think of is to pick a different setting or pick a different game. You don't even have to necessarily stay in the same particular system. Say that you would like to take a 1-month break from this, and hey, why don't we go ahead and try Blades in the Dark, or why don't we try, I'm trying to think of some of the, see, that's the thing, is when you're sitting there on a live stream, I have tons of things, and I have a few Kickstarters that I'm involved in and all this other kind of stuff. But when I'm in front of a camera, I forget their names. So play a different setting for a little while. Play a totally different rule set for a little while with everybody having different roles. It is something to kind of break up the monotony. Try Monster of the Week. Monster of the Week is fun, and that could be a good break, is just Monster of the Week. Because Monster of the Week, as a GM, you don't have to prep. Really, aside from just knowing what the monster is supposed to do, You don't have to come up with, well, why are they in this particular situation? Why are they in the arena? What did they do to this monster? What is this monster's what is their motivation? Are they method acting? You don't have to come up with that. It's just Monster of the Week. So Monster of the Week is actually a great break. And then you kind of got to lead all the way back to me, the most important part about GM burnout is to know when to talk to the players. And if you've seen some of my videos in the past, my big thing that I like to say all the time is the GM is not there to service the players. The game master is a player just like everybody else. They're there to have fun. If they're not having fun, then why are they doing it? I just don't, I don't see how that could actually work out very well if the players treat the GM as the servicer of fun. The GM should be having fun as well. So you, GM, as a player, talk to other players and say, hey, let's go ahead and try to figure out how we can make this a little bit different or what we can do different in order to make this less monotonous. Because I guarantee you, if you as a GM are burning out, you're going to burn out your players really quick. Or they're just going to lose interest. And that happens. And in some cases, there are some adventures where there's one AP I'm playing right now that got interesting again. But there was a period of time in there when it seemed like we weren't making any progress. That was the intent in order to build anticipation and suspense. But for like 3 sessions, we did stuff, but the stuff didn't advance anything. It was just 3-4 sessions of, well, okay, I guess we're now being taken to this setting. Okay, I guess we're now being, so if you don't put in the effort to tie those together, then the players just start to lose interest. And I thought of dropping. No, I didn't really think about dropping, but I was thinking, when it gets to that day to play, you're like, I guess. And then when you play, you actually have fun. But before the session, you're like, I got 3 hours of this. Okay. So burnout is just one of those things that you really need to pay attention to. It's something that you need to try to prevent. And if you see that you have it, it's not going to get better. If you continue doing what you're doing that's burning you out, it's not going to get better at all. And it doesn't have to be something very specifically related to tabletop role-playing game, like I was saying. And my example at the very beginning was I haven't been putting out as many videos. Part of it's by plan. I wanted to work more on quality than quantity, I guess. But the other side of it is I just haven't had as much time as I had prior to January. New year, people have new projects at work, or your family has new projects they need you to do, and things come up and you just don't get a chance to do as much as you want to do. Is that going to be permanent? No. But I can't wait for it to end, and it should be ending pretty soon, which I'm very happy about. There was a lot of stuff going on. The last thing, I had mentioned it before. I can't even think of if I should bring it up. That's why I'm stuttering right now, is whether I should bring it up. But I did have like a personal thing for me. I think last year I had talked about it, and I had to cancel a couple lives last time because I had a dental problem. I had to get a tooth extracted and a bone graft and all this other weird, gross stuff that I don't particularly want to talk about. I don't particularly want to gross people out on the live stream with. However, that is waning. I just had like my second to last appointment for that yesterday, which was a doozy. Let me tell you that. But if you want to have a good horror thing in your particular adventure, make it a dentist. I swear. If there's any dentists watching, you're wonderful people, and you aren't the one that scares people. But all these little things that necessarily don't have anything to do with your campaign can make burnout happen within the game, because it's going to find an outlet somewhere. If you are getting burnt out at work, but you have to, pay the rent and buy groceries and things like that, so you can't take that aside and just kind of quit your job, you're going to find another outlet in order to scrimp and save. And it's going to be usually what your entertainment is. And for me, that is tabletop role-playing games. Like I said, I picked up a third game. So I play a game like Sunday, Monday, Tuesdays, which means I probably should I need to pick up a GMing thing at some point. But that is really all I can think of for, that's my advice or my experiences with GM burnout and burnout in general. The big horrible thing about it is it's so invasive. Even if you can take it the other way, even if work is going fantastic and your personal life's going fantastic and everything else is going fantastic, if tabletop role-playing games is burning you out, it's going to bleed into other stuff. You can't silo everything off. There are some people who are really good at compartmentalizing. The people who truly compartmentalize are spies in movies, and they don't exist in real life. So if you get burnout in one area, it's going to bleed over to other things. And who really wants to see that, or who wants to be part of that? And I know that's something that I don't want to do. So I'm going to kind of slightly move on to another topic. But please put stuff in the chat if you have any ideas or things that you particularly came up with in order to deal with burnout that you've seen, or if you've even have stories for what you participated in as a player and you saw in a GM on how they burn out. But the other thing I did want to bring up, and part of the reason why at the very start I started out with the news from Monster Core, is Monster Core is coming out. So we just did a little cross live stream with Team Player Gaming, and they're going to be doing one over here end of February, and we kind of have a few plans on that. But then there is another cross live stream that's going to be happening, and that's going to be happening around Monster Core. So one of the things that I'm really, really interested in doing is, I'm not going to give too much away about it because the other party is necessarily ready to give it away either. But it's not like the big people within Pathfinder, but reasonably big. I mean, big for me. So we're basically going to be taking our favorite monsters or our favorite encounters with the new Monster Core book, and then kind of creating something and having the other person interact with that particular encounter. That's one of the thoughts I have, simply because Monster Core is going to be, to me, Monster Core is going to almost, and I hate to say it this way because it sounds like such hyperbole. It sounds like I'm going so over the top. But since the remaster dropped, the amount of time I have to spend preparing for my turn has gone up 2-3 times. And once again, I'm not even remotely trying to tell anybody that I'm an expert, because I'm not. I'm trying to be the Sly Strategist. I am not the Sly Strategist, what I'm trying to be. However, and I mentioned it in the last, and actually not in the last live, but in a video I had done prior, is that if I do a video on something, that means that I've spent 3-4 hours reading it, writing out a script, coming up with particular ideas, trying to figure out the best way to explain it. So I've come across a very specific rule about 4 different ways and decided the best way to come up with it. So when I'm playing a remastered game, which all of my tables are remastered right now, and we come across a creature that isn't remastered, it takes me an extra 2 to 3 minutes to, not 2 to 3 minutes, that's an exaggeration, but it takes me 2 to 3 times as long in order to decide, well, let's say I have a Holy Cleric. Well, is my Divine Lance actually going to hurt that thing? Because it's labeled good, but I don't know whether this particular thing is going to be affected by that. So the remaster to me is the remaster of Monster Core is such a big deal, simply because it's going to make my turns go so much quicker. And I imagine as a GM, you can go ahead and have the turns go quicker, and therefore have the encounter go quicker and get back to the fun of the game. Not saying the encounter isn't fun, but I'm sure everybody has had those sessions where you have one monster, and it usually involves monsters with resistances to all physical. This has been my experience. Now that I think about it, except for the new campaign I just started, my other campaigns have largely been mainly physical damage parties. So if you coming across a monster, and I'm sure if you have played any of the APs, you might even guess which one I'm talking about. I'm not going to say because I don't want to give out spoilers. But when you get to, we will say that your characters are level 7, level 8. You're going to get to this particular monster that's just immune to all physical. And if you have a physical heavy party, that particular fight took 3 sessions, 3.5 hour sessions. So you spent 9 hours on this one monster. That got to be a bit much. I love encounters, but when everybody is just trying to hit, it can be a little bit frustrating at times. And that's how players can burn out. And it's also how the GM can burn out, because the GM has to sit there and basically play the same 4 or 5 actions that particular monster has over and over and over and over. And they're going to sit there and after, I don't know about anybody else, but when I'm a GM, if I get a critical hit, I get a little thrill from that. I'm not a player character. I'm not a player killer. However, I'm not afraid to, if that's how the dice roll, basically. But if you have a party that can't hit the monster at all, and then you have to come along and try to just keep hitting and hitting and hitting these poor player characters, that it's kind of like you're bullying the characters after a certain point. And I also don't like fudging rolls, in truth. So it's just one of those things. So let me see this for a second. Man, I really haven't been going that long. I actually don't have a lot more for this particular session. I'm a little bit surprised in that I'm kind of stuttering a little bit because I almost feel like I'm vamping for time. I actually don't have that much more to cover. So I guess I could drag it out by stuttering exactly like I am. I keep seeing a view message deleted. Let me see. Am I doing this? I can't tell. Quality over quantity. Well, thank you. I wish it was not fudging rolls. How much of my rolling is done in secret? So, David, all my rolling is done in secret. That's a good thing. If anybody wants to ask any questions, please feel free to ask. I'll be more than happy to answer. Anything that can be done in secret is done in secret. Now, that is just how I choose to play the game. If it has a secret trait, I'm going to roll in secret. I have done 2 videos related to not the same videos, but related to secret checks both times. And people get hot about secret checks. Some people feel that you don't trust your players when you do secret checks. You don't trust your players to not metagame. And then some people, and that people would be me. So that's why I paused for a second. I was like, oh, that person would be me. Is if I'm GMing, I always do the secret. If I'm a player, I want my GM to do secret rolls because I know I might metagame whether I want to or not. Whether I make the choice to metagame, yeah, that's it. Even as a player, I prefer secret checks. I prefer not to know what the GM rolled. And in truth, and now here's the other side of it from a GM for why I like secret checks, is because if everybody can see the roll I did, once again, I'm not the best role player in the world. I don't have costumes. I don't use props. Have I ever? No, I don't use props as a GM. However, I like to role play just as much as the players do. I like to role play the NPCs. So if the person rolls someone is trying to coerce the NPC and I'm playing the NPC and they succeed, I like to play that out without them saying, oh, I rolled an 18, so you're coerced. What do you get? What you got for me? They have to try to read from what I'm doing. And I can tell how well I'm doing as a GM by seeing if they can get what I'm trying to convey. Oh, yeah, and David, that's the thing. And I tried to say it whenever I got these comments in the videos too, is it's totally cool to do it either way. But that's just my preference. And if I was playing with a GM that rolls everything in the open, that's totally cool too. It's just a preference, and I don't mind either way. Neither one is rules as written. In truth, it has a secret trait, but even rules as written, and I wish I had it available, But even in the old player core handbook and in the new player core, there is a specific thing that says it isn't mandatory. Because it has a secret trait, it's not mandatory to be rolled in secret. It's just to let everyone know that the players shouldn't know what was actually rolled. So there's nothing wrong with doing it either way, and I wouldn't have a problem playing at a table that does it the opposite way. But I prefer to do secret rolls, and I will say that when I was doing the orchestra together, I actually brought that up in the session 0. So it's a good thing to bring up in the session 0 is to what's going to be secret rolls and what aren't going to be secret rolls. And the other thing that happens all the time, this happens all the time in my games. Not my games as a player. It might be a Foundry thing in truth, now that I think about it. The recovery checks when dying are the best secret checks. I'm thinking, now I feel like a liar, Hector. You made me take it back. I don't think I've done recovery checks in secret. That would be a lot of fun. That would be a lot of fun, Hector. I got to remember that. It would crank up the tension during fights. Because then you'd have the players just unconscious if they recover. That's pretty darn good. I'm going to have to try that. But I know a lot of times when I'm playing on Foundry, if you're playing on Foundry, you have the public role, private GM role, blind GM role. Public is everybody can see. Private GM is the player and the GM can see, and blind GM role is only the GM can see. I would say a good 25% of the times, the GM is going to ask you, go ahead and make a perception check. So you roll, and it's supposed to be blind, meaning that the players aren't supposed to see it, and people roll it out open on the table. Happens all the time, especially in Foundry. It happens all the time. As a matter of fact, at a physical table, I couldn't see it happening because if it's a secret check, the GM would generally roll behind the screen. But in Foundry, it happens all the time. But Hector, I really like that particular idea. I'm gonna have to remember that one. Now you're gonna make me look. Can I look without making everybody wait on me? So what I'm looking at is... I'm looking to see if recovery checks have a trait. They don't. Okay, but for me, they do now. Next time I have players do a recovery check, I'm going to make them do it in secret. That is going to be a lot of fun. Fun to roleplay. So I hope that kind of answered that particular thing. I have nothing against, I have nothing against secret checks at all. Or not doing secret checks, rolling secret checks in the open. Nothing at all. No problems with that whatsoever. But in general, when I play, I like the secret checks. And as a player, I like the secret checks as well. Especially if you have a GM that likes role-playing stuff out. It does. I'm saying it does, and you guys don't know what I'm saying it does too. Hector's thing, it really highlights the awesomeness of the player's healer. It 100% would. And another thinking about it, because there are some feats that you can take that basically when someone goes down, you can take a particular feat, which is kind of like a surge, and you can surge to that particular player. It would make those things... It is, I know. That's what because I see like Raven's Path had a message deleted. I'm going to have to check my settings. David had something deleted. Rail had something deleted. And I'm assuming not everybody else. This happened the last live too. I hadn't changed the settings in there. And I apologize for that. I really do. Because I appreciate the messages. And I wish there was a way I could go back and find them. But all that being said, I paused for a second. So this is how the setup works. So I have YouTube Studio over here, cameras right here. I have my OBS right here. But OBS with Stream Elements plugged in has, I'm gonna have to turn down moderation. But I have like 2 live chats over here for some reason. I don't know why. And one over here. I'm trying to see if any of them are showing what was deleted, and none of them are, which is unfortunate. But I guess with that, I am probably going to call it. This is going to be a shorter live, which is fine. I'd rather not draw it out and vamp for 20 minutes and make everybody sorry that they tuned in. But I'm going to talk about a few things that are coming up before I go ahead and get off. So I had talked about it last time. And matter of fact, let me bring up my little note app here so I can talk about it. So I have a whole bunch of things coming up. There are 2 independent creator reviews that are going to be coming out. One is going to be for Badass Bombs and one is going to be from VoteFinder. They are both from creators I'd worked with in the past. And I love the independent creator projects. I love reviewing them. Those take a little bit more time simply because I have to play them. The very first one, I did a very shortened beta test almost. The very first independent creator review I did, and I kind of didn't like that because it's all fun, and I've played it in full. So I agree with everything I said there, but I don't think I gave it enough time. So what I like to do is I like to play the one. So right now I'm doing Vote Finder, which if you played Orc Strong Together is a branch off of something in Orc Strong Together. And then Badass Bombs is, you can probably guess, mainly Alchemist stuff. So those are 2 of the independent creator reviews I'm doing coming up. There's also going to be the next live I want to do, which is not going to be next week. I'm traveling to go visit family next week. So I'm going to be missing out on the live. Not because I'm skipping, because I have to be too busy. I'm hoping by the end of January, or I guess it is already the end of January. Man, it's already February. I'm hoping by the end of this week that everything is going to be smoothed out and I can start spending the amount of time I spent before on the channel. But the next live is going to be on potion crafting and potion theory. I'm super hyped about doing that. Are you talking for David? Are you talking about, when you say your settings, are you talking about adventure settings? Everything I've run in Galarian as far as settings go. If you want to talk about like what I do, world settings, it's been all Galarian. Every single one that I've done is Galarian. So the last 3 that I've done, Orc Strung Together, takes place in Galarian. Gatewalkers, Abomination Vaults. I have the game I just started. Technically, the AP isn't out yet. It's coming out end of March. So we're playing a little bit of Rise of the Rune Lords in order to get into the feel of it. So, but everything I've done is Galarian. I haven't done anything outside of Galarian yet. And a matter of fact, even the campaign creation, which is one of the things I was going to talk about, we're doing that in Galarian as well. So yeah, pretty much stayed there. Independent creator review. Are they adventures published for Pathfinder? Yes. So Vote Finder is basically a subsystem. If you were to do something like, how can I do? I'm trying to make sure I can do this without giving any spoilers. So if you wanted to, we'll take it from the beginner box. We'll say that. We'll take an adventure from the beginner box. If you wanted to become the new mayor of Otari, you could use Vote Finder in order to oust Menemez and become one yourself. So that is a subsystem. The Badass Bombs one is basically an extension of the Alchemist archetype. So those were those that we're talking about. Orc Strong Together, the one of the independent creators I did before, is it's not an adventure path, and it's an adventure. It lasted, for me, it was about a 6-session adventure. Took us basically 1 through 5. And it takes place in an orc village. So the independent creator reviews I do kind of all around. One of them was based on divinity, which gave you, basically for archetypes, how you could bring the divine and divinity into some regular classes and play styles that you wanted to do. I had thought about looking at some of the other settings, but it's a time-consuming thing. Not saying I'm not going to do it, but if that answers your question, David, that's kind of where I've basically done everything I've done in Galarian as far as Pathfinder 2nd Edition. Some of the other stuff. So still have April 1st, still planning on a blooper reel. And the blooper reel is going to be all the screw ups that I do. And you might have just heard it now. I'm not sure, but dog scratches or someone barking when I'm trying to do particular videos. I did get a couple requests for the setup for how you, not for how you do a YouTube channel. Once again, I'm not an expert on this, but I can tell you what I do. I mean, the camera I use, the Sony ZV-10, SM7B microphone with a Rodecaster Pro, but basically how I have everything set up and how you do the lighting. And if you wanted to do a YouTube channel, and if you want to do a YouTube channel for Pathfinder, I'm not competitive at all. The more we have, the merrier. Heck, it seems like there's some Pathfinder creators that are getting away from Pathfinder, so we need more voices in it. More voices we have, more people watch, and the more people we have to play with. Oh, yeah, the next live is going to be potion crafting and potion theory. And then the other one, and I think it was Cooperative Waffles wanted this, and that would be a character creation in Wanderer's Guide. It isn't that I'm having a hard time with that. It's just me and that young guy. Which young guy? There's a couple. But you actually don't have to answer that. That's okay. Wanderer's Guide is just so different. Nonat is... Nonat, as far as I know, well, he came out with a video, and I don't want to get into this at all. There's no hate or no bad things to say about any of this stuff. But he's taking a step back from Pathfinder and is moving on to Heroes something for a while. Yeah, he's stepping away. No, Ronald, the rules lawyer. Nope, he's still in it. Like I said, so Nonat, as far as I know, Nonat was the biggest. Then you had Ronald, and then you had How It's Played. Those are basically the big three Pathfinder creators for a little while. I had thought that DM's Lair was going to do more Pathfinder, and they still do, but not. When they first mentioned starting doing Pathfinder, it seemed like they were breaking away from D&D, and that's not necessarily the case, which makes sense because, so if you, here's my big advice if you want to be a YouTube creator for tabletop role-playing games and make it your living. I'm a small channel. I'm nowhere near, I haven't made anything yet, as a matter of fact. And even so, it would be piddling. Pathfinder's probably not the one to go with. You need to do Dungeons and Dragons or something along those lines where you can get the hundreds of thousands of subscribers. If Nonats was the biggest one and he had, I don't even know at his height, let's say he had 60,000 subscribers. So Pathfinder is not going to be as big as some of the other tabletop role-playing games if you want to do the YouTube creator thing. But I'll be doing a video about how I have my setup going. And it's more involved than you think it is. There's actually like 3 monitors, 2 mics, 1, 2, 3, 4 lights. The lights back there. My little logo thing there, which I spent a lot on. No. This is because I see some new names here. So I'll go ahead and go through this little story here. 16 plus level plus 2 per 5 levels. Oh, that's an interesting one. Yeah, Wizards of the Coast. So I had stepped away from tabletop role-playing games for many years. And then when I was getting back into tabletop role-playing games, basically because of COVID, and I wanted to start expanding my social life again, I bought Pathfinder 2nd Edition, and I bought D&D 5th Edition, and I was deciding which one to play. And I had been doing a little bit with both. And by a little bit, I mean tiny little bit with both. And then the OGL thing happened, and I never looked back at 5e. I stopped playing at, in truth, 2nd Edition. I did play a little bit of 3rd Edition, but not enough to matter at all. And then I had stopped playing D&D for a long time. And I had played a few other various games. Champions was one of them. But yeah, I'm not going to WOTC. I'm not going to Dungeons and Dragons. There's nothing wrong with it. People play what you want to play. And I have been, even reading some of the rules or trying to do comparisons. And I've stepped away. I never started. I never stepped two. But I had thought about doing the whole Dungeons and Dragons versus Pathfinder thing. I just don't get it. The 3-action economy is too good. Champions was great. Champions did rock. What is the game that No Nets is moving to? I think it's a video game, so I'm not going to get it. But Champions was awesome. I loved that game to death. But yeah, 3-action economy, the fact that... So in Dungeons and Dragons, the GM has to know everything. You want to talk about GM burnout? Let's loop it back to the whole point of this whole live stream. City of Heroes, that's it. I don't think I did play City of Heroes. But to loop it all the way back, GM burnout, Dungeons and Dragons expects the GM to know everything and the players to know nothing. And the GM has to make up rules on the spot and try to come up with their own house rules and their own table rules because things aren't spelled out well enough. Where Pathfinder 2nd edition, and I like it. So to me, to their credit, if you like Dungeons and Dragons and you want to play Dungeons and Dragons and you like that, you like to GM that, there's totally cool. There's nothing wrong with that. That's perfectly fine. But I like the fact that if I were to GM a game, let's say I went to one of these conventions and someone said, hey, we need someone to GM a table real quick. I could probably do it. And you could probably do it simply because you have the adventure path, you have the Pathfinder or the Pathfinder Society bounty or whatever you're playing in front of you. You can read it and be like, okay, let's go ahead and go. Because you don't need to know how to play you don't need to know how the players play their characters. You don't need to know those rules. The players have the responsibility to know how to play their characters, and the GM is the one who runs the game. In that way, like I was saying at the beginning, the game master is a player just like everybody else at the table, and they get to have fun. If you have to be some mass arbiter of every single interaction that happens at the table, and then come up with all the wacky rules that you can come up with because it's not explicitly stated in the rules, that's a bummer. And on the other side of it, to people who like the Dungeons and Dragons model, I'm not going to say specifically Dungeons and Dragons, but the Dungeons and Dragons model. What was this? Why, Hector? I'm so sorry they're getting deleted. I don't know why that's happening. I need to adjust the stream elements settings somehow. I don't know what I changed. I apologize for that being deleted, Hector. But there is a lot of overhead for rules. What you're getting at with that comparison. Yes. Okay, so, Rel, to your particular thing, yeah, that's what it seems to be too. And that's unfortunate because those are the ones that are easy to interact with. But, Rel, yes, so Pathfinder has a rule for everything. And that's what I was getting at with the people who like to play a D&D type system is D&D, it's a free-for-all. Generally speaking, you get to make up house rules. Pathfinder 2nd edition, you can still make up house rules. But if you really want to get down to the level of, I would like to make a hot chocolate in this particular downtime, there's probably a rule in Pathfinder that is going to tell you how to do that, how much it's going to cost, what the components are going to be, how hot the fire needs to be, what the mug needs to be made out of, and what the water temperature needs to be in order to get that perfect cup of hot chocolate. Whereas Dungeons and Dragons doesn't even cover downtime, or barely covers downtime. Barely covers downtime enough that I have seen so many modules on RPG Drive-Thru and some of those other ones. Oh, it just did it again. What is up with the... It just deleted a big post again. I apologize for people who are taking the time to type and it's deleting it. I'm so sorry that's happening. And I need to fix that before the next live. There he goes. For me, I burn out with D&D 5e because encounters lacked tactical depth and some easy encounters were close to TPKs. Yeah, that actually happens. And especially hard encounters ended on the second round with a single spell. The other part I don't particularly like about Dungeons & Dragons is the spellcaster martial divide after like level 8. Spellcasters can destroy worlds, and a martial character gets their 4th strike. Okay, that's fair. But yeah, the basically you roll for initiative, and whoever the first magic user is going to be is going to destroy the combat. So it's just not as fun at higher level. Where for me, Pathfinder 2nd Edition is so much fun at higher level. And if you want to see a good example of that, and Ronald does a very good example of this. Ronald has a couple of videos on higher level combat. Literally, he's just going to sit there as a GM and a player and play through what a high level combat looks like. It's a lot of fun, and it's a lot of fun to watch. Okay, so I think I have vamped for as long as I can. But I do appreciate everybody coming on. I did want to once again mention one more time that there is not going to be a live stream next Thursday, but it will start being every Thursday after that for the rest of the year, unless something comes up, which happens. Real life is a real thing. But in general, my plan is to start doing these every Thursday and start doing the videos every other day. Once everything kind of settles down a bit on your calendar. Well, thank you very much, David. I appreciate it. And Raven's Path, thank you very much. Thank you very much for this idea. It's a great idea, and I was able to tie it back in at the end. I hope you saw that. But I appreciate everybody for coming out. I appreciate everybody for spending the time to sit here and interact and come up with good ideas, and even to talk about stuff. Geez, champions. I haven't thought about champions in forever. But I appreciate everybody who listens. So thank you very much, and I hope you have a great day and happy adventuring. So thanks a lot. Bye, everybody.